Beautiful weddings start with beautiful garlands, and there's no faster, simpler way to make garlands than with the Classico system. Each garland is built around a sturdy central lead cord. The foliage is secured in place with florist's wire. With the Classico system, you can easily make 3 feet of custom garland in a minute. Let's start with a simple one-sided garland. We begin having the foliage prepared and close at hand. We're using salal or lemon leaf for this piece. Place the foliage on the top of the cradle with the greens facing up. Lay it in and then take up any slack in the cord or wire. Then wrap the bunch 3 to 4 times. You don't have to pull the garland, just gently guide the greens with your hand. Each time you add another handful of foliage, make sure you cover the mechanics and that you allow an overlap of several inches at the stem end. To make two-sided garland, you'll be adding foliage on alternating sides rather than just on top. First, place the foliage on one side, wrap until it feels secure. We did it 3 to 4 times. Then, add foliage on the opposite side. The garland we prepared for this wedding was created with salal and huckleberry. For a softer look, you could also add ferns or whatever material suits your creative design. When you create a garland with mixed foliage, add the different varieties of greens in alternating bunches. When you're finished with the length of garland, simply wrap the stem end several times in the same spot. Don't pull the garland out by hand until you finish wrapping. You can prepare garland up to 3 days ahead of the event while you have slow time. We suggest you make a sample and test refrigerate it. You can store the garland in large trash bags to protect it and prevent it from dehydration. Garland can be made out of anything: dry or fresh foliage, flowers, Christmas boughs, even wheat. Although flowers can be interspersed with foliage as you make the garland, we have discovered we have better luck when we add them later at the event site. You will have already prepared them by wiring them to picks or placing them in aqua picks. The flowers will stay where you put them because of the density of the weave. There are 2 kinds of wire that you can use with the Classico system: 24 gauge and 22 gauge. 22 gauge is appropriate for most foliage. For very light foliage, you may prefer to use 24 gauge. If a garland seems to be winding too loosely, you'll need to increase the tension of the wire by adding felt washers. You'll find the felt washer underneath the reel of wire. Replace the washer, and if you want even more tension, add additional washers. If the garland seems to be winding too tight, decrease the tension by removing washers one at a time. Be sure the small metal washer under the knob stays in place, and don't over-tighten the knob. There are no washers on the lead cord side. The Classico system is elegantly simple. The machine comes threaded from the manufacturer. To maintain the threading, we recommend securing the ends of the wire and the lead cord when you put the machine away. The flowers were brought to the wedding site in boxes, each one clearly marked for the areas in which they would be used. Most of the flowers were in water picks, although some of the hardier flowers were simply wired onto wooden picks. For a richer look, roses were placed into water picks 3 at a time. Adding the flowers is simple because the weave of the garland holds them nicely. There's no need for wire or hot glue. The number and type of flowers you use, of course, depends upon the client's budget, just as the garland itself may be made more or less thickly depending on how far you have to spread your greens. The price you quote your client should be based on a calculation of X number of yards of garland using Y greens and Z flowers per yard. What florist wouldn't love to offer wedding clients the rich, traditional look of floral garlands such as you see at the entrance of this wedding? The garlands shown in this video were created for an actual wedding and videotaped before the ceremony began. In each case, lengths of green garland made of lemon leaves and huckleberry were placed in position first, then flowers were added afterward. This garland was made to look more attractive from one side, so it was hung with that side facing outward. Sometimes you may need to twist a garland to position it correctly after hanging. The garlands are hooked up with wire and then cracked so they will hang gracefully. Finally, the water-picked flowers are added, and the swag is finished off with a bow. For this display, we used golden tassels, but you could use any kind of a bow. If budgetary concerns prevent you from using many flowers throughout the length of the garland, you could simply place a small cluster of flowers or a nosegay or a bouquet at the crest of each swag. Remember, a draped swag takes more yards of garland than just the linear distance it covers. To calculate the amount of garland we'd need for this swag, we took the total yardage and added 1/3. In this case, we made 2 5-yard lengths of garland and attached them in the middle so the greens would appear to grow outward from the central point. As you can see, we place our wires in advance and measure off the number of rungs on the staircase so the installation will be even. We have also determined in advance that we are going to decorate the staircase in 2 directions, looping the garland over one side, then over the other side. When we arrive on site, we take the garland out of its protective bag and prepare it for hanging. We crack the garland and attach it with the wire, starting at the bottom of the staircase. The garland is placed so that it appears to be growing up as it flows graciously along the front of the staircase. Remember, crack the garland at each point it crosses over the banister. Once again in planning, we measured the total amount of yardage to cover the staircase, then added 1/3 more to accommodate the swag. Next come prepared flowers. Be sure to label each box so you will know which garland it belongs with. After getting an overview of the design, we insert the water-picked or wooden-picked flowers. And as a finishing touch, we added nosegays where the cording comes together. Columns can offer a special challenge for decorating with garlands. We attach each one to the column at the top and bottom with wires hooked onto heavy rubber bungee cords. These are readily available at most hardware stores. Bungee cords save time and money, but you have to make sure that they have the strength to support the weight of the garland that you plan to use. Also, make sure each wire is twisted securely over itself. When you have 2 or more columns, you'll want to make sure that the garlands on the columns are absolutely symmetrical with each other. To do this, measure the height of the column and divide by the number of times that the garland will wrap around. Measure this interval from the top of each column and mark it with a small piece of green floral tape that can be removed later after the garland has been installed. In the case of this 10-foot column, you would measure 2.5 feet from the top, mark the spot with tape, measure down 2.5 more feet, mark it, and so on. The pieces of tape help to guide the placement of the garland for perfect symmetry. We had extra garland left over when we finished wrapping this column. Instead of securing it at the bottom, which we could have also done, we decided to wrap it around for a more lush look. Again, we added prepared flowers to finish it off. The weight of the garland will push the tablecloth in, so you need to make some preparations ahead of time to make sure this doesn't happen. One solution is to place a ring of corrugated cardboard under the cake table before you cover it with the skirt. Another, less time-consuming possibility is to simply place some large boxes in strategic positions underneath the table where the garland will hang down. In our example, we cut the cardboard in advance, so it is as long as the circumference of the table and as wide as the table is high. We allowed a generous measure for these dimensions, knowing that we can always trim it once we get it in place. At the top, we pulled the cardboard tight around the perimeter of the table. Once the cardboard was in position, we covered it completely with a floor-length table skirt. To hang the loops of green garland from the tablecloth, you need to first create anchors in the cloth using corsage pins and taped wire. At 4 locations around the table, we made X's by sticking double corsage pins into the cloth, facing down and crossing each other like daggers. We wrapped some wire around the tops and bottoms of the pins, then added more pins until we had a very secure anchor with plenty of wire to grab the garland. Now we're ready to hang the table garland. At the top of the loops where they attach to the wire hangers, we cracked the garland, grasping it firmly and bending it so that it festooned nicely. You may only want your garland to go halfway down the table. In this case, we took it all the way to the floor. To make sure you have enough garland to go all the way around the table, always be sure you make a little more garland than you think you'll need. You can snip off the excess beyond the hanger where you started so you get a full overlapping. Water-picked hydrangeas provide a decorative cap for the top of each festoon, but ribbons could also be used. You might even wish to use a cluster of flowers to match your cake table. The aisle was handled exactly the same way as you would decorate an aisle in a church. Because we didn't have church pews and were using topiary trees to carry out the garden theme, we placed wires among the branches of the trees to carry the garland. We measured the yardage we would need to cover the length of the aisle and added 1/3 more. As in all locations, remember to crack the garland at each point of support, then add the flowers. Instead of capping off the garlands in the topiary trees, as we did here, you might want to add ribbons or French bows cascading to the floor. The options are limitless, and this is a very effective treatment for a church aisle. Finally, we'll look at the hoopah or gazebo. The bride requested a hoopah for this wedding, and it was brought to the wedding site in sections. The top section, which you see has an X on the top, had been greened out with garlands ahead of time, so we didn't have to do it on site. Our workers first assembled the framework, then prepared to hang each of the 4 corners with lengths of green garland. Again, we attached the wire, this time in a horizontal direction. We brought in our pre-made and pre-marked garland and secured it with wire in 4 places on each pole. There are 2 thick garlands on each pole, placed for maximum show from the congregation's point of view. Once the framework is hung with green garland, add the flowers almost to the bottom of each pole. You may wish to fill in the area around the base with flowering potted plants. If you do, make sure you place them where the guests have the best view of them. Don't waste them in the back of the hoopah or the gazebo. With the Classico system and your own designs, you will find unlimited ways to create beautiful weddings. So, use your imagination and have fun.